I'm here with Ed Reeves, who was a scout dog handler for the Army in Vietnam. Ed, thanks for joining me. It's good to see you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here at the museum and pleasure doing the interview. I missed not going to the school, but
Yeah, we miss having you out. It's been tough not having you here the last couple of years, but hopefully next year we'll be able to bring you back.
Get back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about your life before you joined the Army?
Well, I was born in Columbus, raised in the hilltop until I was about 12, and then we moved to Grove City when I was in junior high, and went through school there, did just the normal routines that teenagers do. I had a paper route and carried papers and earned my money that way, and was able to enjoy school lunches, that I purchased myself. Graduated from Grove City High School in 1968. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but all my friends were either enlisting or getting drafted. So, yeah, I couldn't figure out. I went down and talked to a recruiter, and he says, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I just out of high school." He had a model of a Huey helicopter on his desk, and he said, "You ever think about flying one of these?" And I says, "No, I've never even flown on an airplane at that point." So he said, "Well, take the test and see how you do." So I took the test, and he called me a couple days later, says, "Come in and talk to me. Your test scores were good." And he started going on about what I had to do to get into it. When it all said and done, I'd spend about 8 years in the military, and I says, I wasn't planning on that at all. So I declined it. About 3 months later, I got drafted. So I think I made my recruiter a little upset.
So how did you get involved with the scout dog program in the Army then?
The CO came out and he says, "Anybody have any experience with dogs in civilian life? German Shepherds." And I lived 2 houses down from the police dog in Grove City, one of the first ones that they had. And I was friends with the officer, and we did a lot together. He got the dog, so I got working with the dog, and I'd go out with him and hide, and we'd do all kinds of things, and he would come and find me, and even taking his weapon out and shooting it so the dog would get used to hearing weapons fired. So I was thinking about that, and Captain said, "Anybody else?" So I did something that I was told never do in the Army, and that's volunteer. But I raised up my hand and volunteered. Kind of the best thing I ever did. We 2 or 3 days of orientation, and then we got to go pick out a dog and started training, basic obedience.
What was that like, picking out a dog?
Well, they had a kennel full down there, and they just told us, so you go around and see a dog that you like. And I walked around the kennel, and this one dog kind of stuck his head out the box, looking at me, and to me it looked like his eyes were crossed. He had funny looking eyes. And I looked up, and I saw the name Prince. And "Prince, come here." And he jumped down and came right up, real friendly. And I said, "Well, I'm going to take this dog." The police dog that we had in Grove City, that was their dog's name, Prince.
Oh, okay.
Prince was a good size. He was about 85, 90 pounds. And we started training, and we finished the on-leash training, and there was 10 of us out of the class of 25 that were picked to go to off-leash training that they were trying out. So we went through the off-leash program too, and completed that, and got our orders to go to Vietnam. So I got 5 more months in the States of training.
So is there the off-leash training, is it more advanced type training for
Yeah,
dogs?
we get into more hand signals with the dogs. We start them off with a bigger, longer leash so they get used to working away from us. And we also have a dog whistle, which mine's back here in this case. The dog, it's supposed to be a silent, but you could hear it if you're close enough to it. But the idea of that was if the dog's working off leash and he's 20, 30 feet away from him, I got to get his attention. So I'd toot on the whistle, and he'd stop, turn around, and look at me. Then I'd give him hand signals, what I want him to do. Sit, stay, come back, or lay down, or whatever. And most of the time it was come back.
Wow.
That was our job, to be the point team, to sniff out these. He was trained he wasn't trained to bark. He was trained to stay quiet. Just when he alerted, he, depending on his movements, how his nose was, his ears were doing, what his whole thing was kind of alerting to, then I would stop and call, like I say, usually call him back, and then I tell the people in back of me, okay, dog's got something up there. He's smelling people, but he's not seeing them. or he's down close to the ground, he's smelling something on the ground, which could be a mine or a tripwire. So we would go out and investigate it, and, or make other plans, go down a different path or light up the area.
Yeah.
So,
were you attached to different units from time to time, or?
well, each division would have a 1 or 2 scout dog platoons depending on their needs, and they had a tracker dog unit team in there too for tracker dogs. But we supported like a battalion or a brigade.
Okay.
And when these people out in the field come across trails, or usually it's after they had a little problem, then they'd say, okay, we need a dog team. Mm-hmm. So, they're getting resupplied. They would send us out to support them. I never served with I served with one unit twice in the 11 months that I was, but 9 months that I was out in the field. I'd go out and report to who's ever in charge, and I say, my name's Ed Reeves, and this is my dog Prince. So if they ever wanted me, they say, hey, send Prince up here.
Uh-huh.
They didn't know my name, but they
knew
always
the dog.
remembered Prince's name. Yeah. And we would go be the point team, and whatever squad was walking the point, we would go get with them, and depending on what we thought the needs were, who was going to work what they call a slack man, to be, my job is to watch the dog. I'm not watching the area too much. So the guy behind me, who's walking right behind me, he's kind of watching the area in case,
yeah,
we do miss something. He might see something that we didn't, or that the dog didn't, and like I say, I'm watching him. So the guys would always come up to me, hey, is it okay to pet your dog? I had a German Shepherd, I had a poodle or whatever. Yeah, fine. So he would sit down and talk to him, and I always kind of remember that now. It's kind of like therapy for him, because they just, just kind of, you could see him take a breath, just kind of relax.
Right. And so Prince was able to do that. Then he was able to realize this is not a threat and sense the need in the soldiers.
Yeah, the only ones I kept away from him we had our scouts, and they were NVA or VC that surrendered and came over to our side, and they would if we had something out there, the scout would normally come up and tell us what he thought it was too.
Is there a particular mission or incident from your time there in Vietnam with Prince that really kind of sticks out in your mind?
This was our first mission. So we're walking down the trail, and not even an hour out, Prince alerts. And so I call him back, and I said, he's smelling people, but he's not seeing anything or hearing anything. And so, we sent him back out again, and he got that same spot and stopped. So we decided, well, we wasn't, if people there, by now something would have happened. So we approached. I told Prince to sit, so we got up to that area where we were sitting, and we saw a trail going off that way, fresh tracks. And so, the lieutenant comes up, and he says, okay, so he told our squad, go down and set up point security. And he had the third squad stay back, for rear security, and the next squad was going to go up the trail to see what was up there. And Prince and I was sitting down on point security, and I'm sitting there on this little hill with the sergeant, and we're kind of just talking and smoking a cigarette. All of a sudden, Prince stands up, and he's looking off to the right. His ears were cocked. I said, we got people coming off to the right. About 2 minutes, well, not even 2 minutes. I mean, probably 10 seconds later, two guys come walking out in the field or out in the trail. And of course, that time, as we say, all heck breaks loose. And after about 2 minutes, it all quits. And I'm sitting there. I didn't have Prince on a leash. He bolted, but the guy that's walking my slack caught him, and they stayed down behind the hill. So when it quieted down, I said, "Where's Prince? Anybody got Prince?" And I forget the handler's name now too, but he says, I got him. So I went over, and he said, well, that's a lesson, when you set up, keep him on a leash. I mean, when you got 30 weapons going off at one time, bullets flying everywhere, and everybody yelling and screaming, and during that time, I'm sitting there, and I'm lead. I had magazines in the handler I replaced said, here, take this magazine that I made up of all tracer rounds. So we switched, and he said, you might need them. Well, everybody was following my shots, all the tracer rounds, so we had everybody sweeping that area. And all of a sudden, while I'm doing that, I get, something hits me on the side of my face. I get two hits and something warm running down my face, but I didn't feel any pain. So when it settled down, it quit. I reached up. Well, it wasn't blood, I look at the tree, and there's 2 bullet holes in the tree, and the bark and the sap is what hit me in the face.
Huh.
So that's kind of, at that point, I said, okay, where's Prince? Well, we went back and set up point security. The scout went down and found a couple people. And anyway.
Yeah.
So that was the first hour of our first mission of our first day.
There's some serious excitement to start off your time in
Yeah.
Vietnam.
I got a hold of him. They got resupplied and had all this candy and had Tootsie Rolls. When I was a kid, the Tootsie Rolls were big, for nickel candy. And I pulled out a Tootsie Roll and opened it up, and broke off a bit, and gave it to Prince. And I took a bite of it, and I said, well, Prince, I said, it's going to be a long freaking year.
Yeah. So what do you think the hardest part for Prince was in Vietnam?
The heat. The heat, yeah. And, walking through rice paddies, the bugs that are not ticks, leeches. When we do something like that, once we got set up, the first thing we did is check, for leeches on us, and I had to check Prince and go with that. That was, it's just many dogs died of heat stroke.
I was just going to ask. I mean, it's got to be really dangerous for them too.
It was, yeah. But there was signs, and if Prince, he had a big curly tail, and his tail was always up. If his tail went down, I knew he was done. So I would tell him, hey, we need to take a break. I got to. And the first thing we did, every time we did stop, the first thing I did is pulled out. I carried 9 quarts of water with me, starting out of 5-quart and 4 1-quarts, and I'd give him a canteen, a cup full of water, and he'd usually drink every bit of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask. It's probably hard keeping him hydrated.
Yeah. Well, it's the same way with us. Pull out the canteen and take a drink, and then come across the stream. Most of the time it was fast moving. I'd dump out the water and take that mountain stream water. It's better than what we had.
Okay.
We weren't supposed to, but as long as it was fast moving, it was okay. Instead if it was standing water, then you had to put iodine pills in it.
Okay.
And that water tasted terrible.
Oh yeah, that's not good at all. It's probably a pretty difficult memory, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about being separated from Prince at the end of the India tour and everything.
I was short, getting thinking about coming home. I had my orders and everything, so I took 2 steaks off the grill and put them on a paper plate, and cut them up in pieces, and went out to Prince's house. And I sit down on the outside, and he comes sit to me, and so I'm saying kind of my goodbyes to him and feeding him a piece of steak. And that was hard. Then the morning that I was leaving, I come out walking out of the hooch, and Prince saw me, and so he jumps out, and he's sitting there at the end of his chain. And I said, well, I got to go say goodbye to him. So I went over and petting him and was saying goodbye to him. And that was July 3rd, 70. July 3rd of 71. That's the last time I ever saw him. Yeah. That was a hard day. Over 4,000 dogs served in Vietnam. 4,244 is what we have on our memorial outside here. And out of those 4,244, only 204 dogs left Vietnam alive. And I found out 36 years later that Prince was one of the 204 dogs that came home. At least out of 4,244 dogs, there's one story that has a truly happy ending.